Welcome to this informative session on revised draft ESRS E1 to E5, the Environment Topical Standards. Whether you're compiling your company's sustainability report or using that data to drive investment decisions, you've probably heard of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. But big changes just landed. In this video, we'll walk you through the key changes in the revised Environmental Topical Standards. E1. Climate change, E2, pollution, E3, water, E4, biodiversity and ecosystems, and E5, resource use and circular economy. Let's get started with ESRS E1 on climate change. The exposure draft for E1 retains 11 disclosure requirements, but with major simplifications, streamlined metrics, and enhanced reporting flexibility. E11. Transition plan now takes a concise, clearer narrative form. The revised disclosure requirement offers flexibility on CAPEX/OPEX and better integration with ESRS S2, while also maintaining provisions on compatibility with 1.5 degrees Celsius. E1 GOV3 has been streamlined and moved to ESRS 2. E12 and E13, risk, scenario analysis, and resilience, is now better aligned with ESRS S2 and streamlined. The scenario analysis has also been simplified. E14 to E16, policies, actions, and targets are now better aligned and streamlined with fewer overlaps with ESRS 2. The structure has been made clearer and less redundant. There is more flexibility around target definition. A similar approach has been taken for the other environmental standards, avoiding redundancies between the environmental standards and ESRS 2. Within E17, energy use, revenue-based intensity has been deleted. The focus is on actual consumption, and high climate impact sectors provisions have been deleted. E18, GHG emissions, now offers clearer GHG boundary guidance, aligning with the GHG protocol and streamlining provisions on biogenic emissions. E19, carbon credits and GHG removals, is leaner with the deletion of the reference linked to net zero target and streamlined disclosures. E110, internal carbon pricing, has seen a significant reduction of data points and improved alignment with ESRS S2. E111, anticipated financial effects, has been streamlined and offers optional splits, better tailored to financial institutions. The overall impact of these changes: a 57% reduction in total data points, including a 54% cut in mandatory disclosures. A clear step towards more focused and manageable reporting. Let's now turn to ESRS E2, pollution, where similar simplification efforts are helping to streamline disclosures and clarify expectations. The exposure draft for E2 retains 5 disclosure requirements, all significantly simplified to improve clarity. E21, E22, and E23 covers policies, actions, and targets related to pollution. These have been better aligned and streamlined with ESRS 2, with fewer overlaps. E24 focuses on pollution of air, water, and soil. References to EPRTR have been replaced with a general requirement to report on pollutants emissions. Microplastics are now clearly distinguished between primary and secondary categories, and reporting on secondary microplastics can be done qualitatively. E25, substances of concern and substances of very high concern, has been simplified. The disclosure requirement is now more targeted. Reporting on substances of concern applies only to chemical manufacturers and importers of chemical substances, while reporting on substances of very high concern applies to both chemical manufacturers, importers of chemical substances, and users of substances of very high concern. A REACH threshold reference has also been added to clarify reporting obligations for substances of very high concern in articles. This is a finished object or product. While reservations were raised about the absence of mandatory site-level disclosures, EFRAG ultimately prioritized flexibility and simplicity, in line with Commissioner Albuquerque's mandate. The result was a 73% reduction in the number of total data points for ESRS E2 pollution, including a 61% cut in mandatory data points. Let's now move on to ESRS E3 Water. Formerly titled Water and Marine Resources, ESRS E3 now focuses strictly on water-related impacts, risks, and dependencies. Marine-related issues are still included in ESRS, but addressed differently. Impact drivers on marine ecosystems and biodiversity are covered under E1 and E2. Impacts on marine biodiversity and ecosystems in E4, and the use of marine resources, both mineral and biological resources, in E5. That said, disclosures involving the use of marine waters, such as the withdrawal of marine water for desalination or cooling, remain within the scope of E3. When it comes to the structure, the exposure draft for the updated ESRS E3 standard has been streamlined and retains 4 disclosure requirements, covering policies, actions, targets, and metrics. E3-1 policies. One water-specific provision is maintained, providing transparency on water policy exclusions in areas of water risk. E3-2 actions and resources. Similarly, one water-specific provision remains, focusing on actions and resources allocated to those areas at water risk. E3-4 metrics. This is where the most significant changes appear. Disclosure of water withdrawals and water discharges, which was previously voluntary, is now mandatory. This change supports a complete corporate water balance, something companies already have to understand to report on water consumption, and is essential for characterizing companies' impacts on water resources, as well as their dependency on water as a driver of business risk. Lastly, water intensity metrics tied to revenue have been removed. Overall, these changes have led to an 82% reduction in the number of data points for ESRS E3 water, including a 70% reduction of mandatory data points. Turning to biodiversity, the exposure draft for ESRS E4 standard on biodiversity and ecosystems has been significantly restructured and simplified to improve clarity and usability. It is also now clear that impacts on marine species and ecosystems fall under this standard. The revised E4 keeps 5 disclosure requirements. E41, Transition Plan for Biodiversity and Ecosystems, is now mandatory, but only if the company already has a plan that is publicly available. The related requirements have also been simplified and aligned with the provisions for climate mitigation transition plans under the climate standard in E11. In contrast, requirements about the resilience of company strategy and business model related to biodiversity and ecosystems have been removed. E42, E43, and E44. Policies, actions, and targets requirements were simplified in line, and the biodiversity specifications have been considerably reduced. The specification on the use of biodiversity offsets is maintained. E45. Metrics related to biodiversity and ecosystem change has been consolidated for enhanced clarity and reduction purposes. Location-specific disclosures on biodiversity, previously placed in various sections of E4, are now streamlined and consolidated into the revised metrics section. Furthermore, previous specifications on metrics connected to E4 topics, many of them optional, are consolidated into one generic paragraph requiring disclosure of metrics for all material E4 topics. When disclosing on these material topics, companies retain the freedom to choose the most relevant metrics. Despite the lack of specific mandatory biodiversity metrics and further location-specific provisions, EFRAG has maintained the strategic focus of biodiversity-related disclosures, enabling material, relevant, and principle-based disclosures. Overall, a reduction of 90% in the number of data points has been achieved for ESRS E4, biodiversity and ecosystems. This statistic includes a 78% reduction of mandatory data points. Finally, we turn now to the substantial transformation of ESRS E5, resource use and circular economy. This standard has been reshaped to better reflect the importance of natural resources, including the transfer of marine-related resource disclosure from ESRS E3 to E5, alongside a new reference to the Critical Raw Materials Act. E5 has 5 distinctive sections: E51, E52, and E53 policies, actions and targets related to resource use and circular economy, now better aligned and streamlined with fewer overlaps with ESRS 2. A new specification has been added relating to policies on the integration of circularity and eco-design principles into key products and services. E54 focuses on resource inflows, narrowing its scope to key materials, a new concept defined in the glossary, and a new data point on percentage of key materials that are critical and strategic raw materials as defined by the Critical Raw Material Act. E55 resource outflows is divided into 2 subtopics: products and services, and waste. In the products and services section, companies disclose expected product durability, repairability, rates of recyclable and recycled content for products and packaging separately. A new data point allows companies to report waste with unknown final destination as a percentage. This streamlined structure eliminates previous complexity while keeping a thorough focus on circular economy principles. Overall, these changes have led to a 73% reduction in the number of data points for ESRS E5, resource use and circular economy, including a 61% cut in mandatory data points. Taken all together, what's the impact of the revised Environmental Topical Standards ESRS? A 71% reduction in the number of data points, including a 61% cut in mandatory data points, in line with the omnibus proposals. These updates are more than just technical tweaks. They mark a strategic evolution shaped by real-world experience from the first wave of sustainability reporting. You can count on simplified language and structure, retaining only impactful and decision-useful data, less detail, but sharper insights, maintenance of the global alignment with key frameworks like the ISSB, Global Reporting Initiative, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, and the Nature Positive Initiative, and seamless integration with EU policy priorities, including the EU Circular Economy Action Plan, the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, the Critical Raw Materials Act, and the Right to Repair Directive. What happens next? Now it's your turn. Be part of the conversation and shape the future of sustainability reporting. Take part in the 60-day public consultation. Your input matters. Head to efrag.org and share your feedback by 29 September 2025. Your insights will help make the revised standards more practical, meaningful, and fit for purpose. Thanks for watching.